The protagonist thought dying would be the end of his story, but it was just the beginning. He wakes up in the body of a spoiled noble from a powerful dark mage family, the same guy who ruined his life and died in disgrace. Now, with the world heading toward destruction and only 5 years to prepare, Chris has to flip the script. Can a so-called loser really outsmart demons, fix a broken legacy, and maybe become the Empire's strongest mage? Let's find out. Chris found himself waking up in a whole new life as a young noble from the Dark Mage bloodline within the Magic Empire, part of one of its 12 ruling families. To his surprise, he discovered he had been sent 15 years back in time and had just 5 years to prepare for the Demon King's invasion. Just when he thought he'd seen everything, he was astounded to spot demons in cheerful sun hats tending to a lovely garden. But what really struck Chris was when he realized whose life he had found himself living. The name? Christian Van Baron Khazar. Chris vaguely remembered that name. It clicked. Van indicated he belonged to a lesser demonic bloodline, and the Khazar family, a wealthy branch of the Baron household, had quite a notorious reputation due to their ties to the Dark Maga family. The Khazar family had 2 heirs. The older son, Christian, was a bit of a troublemaker who ultimately brought shame to the family, leading them to lose hope and end his life. Now, as Chris sat with this heavy realization, he couldn't help but feel freaked out by the tough fate of the guy whose shoes he was now filling. He punched the wall in frustration, grumbling about the irony. He had always dreamed of being a rich kid, but definitely not this rich kid. It left him pondering why he was given a second chance, what he was supposed to do in this wild situation, and, most importantly, how he ended up in the body of a guy marked for doom. Over the past 3 days, Chris had been trying to keep his composure while figuring out a way out of this mess. If his past self had been executed for being a jerk, maybe trying to be a decent person could change his luck. Now that he was a wealthy heir, he thought he might finally get to live the life he always wished for. But reality hit him hard. There was a big challenge ahead, Ragnarok. Chris recalled that the Demon King's master plan to start a war involved offering up human sacrifices. Since he hadn't figured this out in his previous life, both the forces of light and the Magic Empire had ended up wiped out. Chris knew he had to step up to prevent chaos if he wanted to survive. The Demon King posed a huge threat, but the scariest part was all the demons in the Magic Empire who followed him. If Chris wanted to flourish, he'd need to outsmart the Demon King and take that title for himself. Right now, he had 5 years until the invasion began, and he was considering taking a risk. After all, doing nothing would mean certain doom. Plus, if he played his cards right, he could go from living in a nice house to ruling the entire empire. When Chris walked into his dad's office, he was met with a wave of frustration. Count Khazar, visibly upset, reminded him that he was supposed to be reflecting on his mistakes, not just strolling in after getting into trouble again. It was clear that one more blunder could cost Chris dearly. Under that pressure, Chris took a deep breath and calmly said he was there to apologize for his past mistakes. But deep down, he wanted to clear his name and kick off his grand plan. Count Khazar, taken aback, listened as Chris confidently reiterated his apology, promising he wouldn't repeat those mistakes again. Count Khazar is a bit skeptical. He feels Chris's sudden change of heart seems a little off, especially considering the trouble he's caused. Chris, feeling a bit confused about what's really bothering his dad, reminds him about the memory loss he mentioned a few days ago. Reflecting on his actions, he starts to feel some regret. Count Khazar still has his doubts, recalling similar promises from the past. Chris suggests spending a month in the punishment ward as a way to show he's serious about making things right. The punishment ward is a notorious place where high-ranking demons end up for some really serious offenses. It's pretty grim, lacking any light, and you're stripped of the things that remind you of who you are. Even the toughest individuals can find it challenging to cope, but Chris sees it as a way to step back and quietly reflect on his life. He warns Chris that a guy like him might struggle in such a tough environment, but he feels it's necessary to prove his commitment to changing his ways. Khazar chuckles, reminding Chris of the times he made promises in the past that didn't pan out. However, he decides to give him one more chance to show he's serious. He makes it clear, if Chris doesn't show significant progress by the end of the month, he'll have to leave the family for good. Chris truly feels the weight of that ultimatum. Without his family's support, he knows there are plenty of others who would take advantage of his situation. But he stands firm, his voice calm and confident. He agrees to his dad's terms but adds one condition. If he proves he's changed, he'd like to ask Count for an important favor. Khazar, feeling a bit irritated by Chris's confidence, Khazar decided to agree to Chris's request. If Chris kept his word, of course. As he left the office, Khazar had a nagging feeling that Chris might be in over his head. Later, Chris was in his room admiring a gem-like object when Cox, the family servant, popped in to let him know that the punishment ward was ready for him. Chris placed the gem down on the table and followed Cox out. As they strolled through the halls, Chris couldn't help but overhear some of the servants gossiping. They seemed surprised that the family's notorious troublemaker was willingly heading to the punishment ward. Their conversation drifted to a recent incident where Chris had insulted a young lady from the infamous Manga family. Count Khazar had to step in and apologize personally, even though there had been a long-standing feud. That really hurt Chris's reputation and left him looking not so great. One servant sighed, hoping that Chris would finally mature, while another jokingly said it was probably never going to happen. One betting he'd make it 2 days at most, while the other playfully doubted he'd last even a full day. Chris and Cox stroll along until they reach the entrance of the punishment ward, where they spot 2 big guards hanging out. Chris takes a brief glance at one of them, thinking it's pretty common for the Magic Empire to use Death Knights as guards. He shrugs it off, not too concerned as long as they're not part of his visit, and continues on. Just as he's about to step inside, he hears a familiar voice call out, "Brother!" Chris turns around to see his younger brother, Turn, the ideal student. He's surprised when Turn suddenly pulls out a sword. A wave of concern washes over him, but he quickly gathers himself and asks Turn what's going on. With an intense shout, Turn expresses his frustration, accusing Chris of being a disappointment to the family. He doesn't know what Chris is planning this time, but he warns that if Chris brings shame upon them again, he'll kill him. In that moment, Chris suddenly realizes the truth. Turn is the one who could really be a challenge for him. He recalls their first encounter during the invasion. Back then, Turn was already a well-known demon with some impressive curse magic skills. Looking at Turn, Chris can't help but notice how innocent he appears for someone his age. It's clear that Turn has put in a lot of hard work, but to Chris, who has survived the chaos of a world in ruins, he still feels just like a kid. Turn hesitates, looking a bit thrown off. Chris simply says, "I got the message." Turn tries to say something else, but Chris doesn't linger and heads into the punishment ward, leaving Turn fuming over their conversation. Once inside, Chris checks in with himself. As expected, he can neither see nor hear anything, but he feels a light tingle in his fingertips. His dad must have given him just the right touch to work with the supplies he brought. Without that, he'd be in a bit of a bind. Chris is made of tougher stuff. Having gone through so much as a treasure hunter, he sees this sensory deprivation not as a limitation. Now, he can focus on healing the troublesome body he inherited. It's going to take some effort, but with the medical skills he learned from a saint, some body mod techniques from the circus, and a few mana stones, he feels optimistic about making it work. Chris picks up a mana stone. It makes sense that a noble family would indulge even someone with a rather infamous past, like the last owner of this body. He can't help but feel a pang of nostalgia as he thinks back to the days when he and Ivan would work hard to get just one stone like this. Feeling motivated, he rolls up his sleeves and gets started by purifying his body with a white mana stone. It might be a bit tedious, but it's an essential step. He needs to clear out all the impurities with pure mana, and even a tiny mistake could throw everything off balance. Before long, a small smile spreads across Chris's face as he realizes he's finished the purification surprisingly easily. In Count Khazar's office, he's having a chat with Cox about Chris. Cox shares that Chris decided to go into the punishment ward on his own. Count feels a wave of concern as he thinks that maybe Chris has reached a point where he feels he can't ask for help, which makes him regret letting him go in there alone. Count reflects on how Chris used to be such a bright and promising young man, but then things seem to spiral out of control. He wonders if Chris's pride and talent ended up becoming obstacles for him rather than strengths. But he doesn't linger on those thoughts for too long, convincing himself that maybe it's for the best if Chris finds a way to either rise up or move on instead of continuing to struggle the way he has been. Then, a memory of Chris's determined expression pops into his mind, and it stirs something within him. However, after having been tricked in the past, he worries that this time may just follow the same pattern. Curious, he asks Cox if anything unusual occurred when Chris entered the punishment ward. When Cox hesitates, Count encourages him to be completely honest and share whatever he knows. Cox brings up how Chris found a variety of mana stone, including a fascinating hallucination stone that can create illusions. Although there might be some unusual side effects, he suggests they check on Chris in the punishment ward. Count's expression shifts to one of concern. He feels strongly that even if Chris is struggling, that door should remain closed. Fast forward a month, and Count stands in front of the punishment ward, curious and slightly anxious about how Chris may be faring. If he's still around, he must be going through a tough time. When the door swings open, Count is taken aback. Chris steps out looking fantastic, full of energy and confidence. with no signs of distress at all. He catches Count's gaze and grins, asking why he seems so surprised. He reminds him that he promised to turn things around, and hey, he actually did. Count, clearly surprised, sees that familiar spark in Chris's eyes from their childhood. Once he collects his thoughts, he simply acknowledges that it's clear Chris has come through the experience. Chris laughs and playfully asks if that's a compliment. Count counters, telling him not to get too full of himself. Although Chris feels a bit miffed, he can't help but feel proud of the strides he's made in just a month. He's worked hard to get in shape for sword fighting, and with the help of the white mana stone, he feels more energetic than ever. The hallucination stone turned out to be a clever choice, too. Even though Cox teases him for using what's essentially a secret enhancement, it's truly sped up his transformation. He's even managed to create 2 cores, making him a first-level light mage. To keep things under wraps, he cleverly concealed the light core within a dark one. If anyone found out, it would definitely be a tricky situation. With a sense of accomplishment, Chris turns to his dad and says since he's upheld his promise, he has a small favor to ask. Count raises an eyebrow, curious about what it could be. Chris asks if he can use the Black Forest Knights training grounds. Count's expression shifts, showing his reservations as he explains that it's not a place for someone like Chris. After all, it's one of the 3 main training spots for the Dark Mage family, reserved for only the top knights to showcase their skill. Chris is really excited about getting to see the Black Forest Knights in action. He believes it could be a great source of inspiration for him. After giving it some thought, Count agrees to let him visit the training grounds, but gives him a friendly reminder to keep his cool and not show any signs of weakness in front of the knights. Just as Khazar is about to head out, Chris stops him with one more request. Before we know it, we're at the lively training grounds where the Black Forest Knights are busy. 3 young knights are curious about Chris, who is getting ready for his training session. Chris can tell they're sizing him up, but he understands that being the Count's son won't earn him their respect. It's all about strength in this magical empire. But Chris isn't just there for the training. He's also got his sights set on the library. This was actually part of his second request to his dad. However, his dad has a small condition. Chris needs to get a recommendation. Letter from Vice Commander Bellon to even think about getting a key to the library. This library is super important to Chris because it holds all the black magic books from the Khazar family. When Chris argues that he should be allowed in just because he's family, his dad playfully reminds him of the time Chris got caught trying to take valuable books to sell on the black market. That's when it really hits Chris that the previous owner of this body was quite the troublemaker. Instead of feeling offended, though, he comes up with a clever plan to win over Vice Commander Bellon and get that key quickly. Just then, his brother Turn arrives with a group of friends, playfully reminding Chris that this place isn't really meant for pests like him. Chris feels a bit annoyed to deal with Turn again, but then he pauses and starts to grin as a clever idea sparks in his mind. Turn's timing really couldn't be better. Turn basically warns Chris to back off, lucky that he just avoided the ward's punishment. Chris stays chill and asks if Turn's really ready to back up his tough talk, then catches him off guard by saying their dad is totally on board with it. Out of nowhere, Bellon, the vice commander, jumps in and talks about the Count's decision. Chris immediately picks up on the strong magical energy radiating from her, at least 4th tier, but he's pretty used to that kind of vibe. With a friendly smile, he gives her a respectful bow. Bellon is a bit surprised when she sees Chris handling her pressure without a second thought. He playfully mentions that if she thinks that's his style, he's ready to prove he deserves a spot in the training ground. Curious, Bellon asks him how he plans to do that. Chris points over to Turn and his crew, suggesting a friendly duel with one of them. At first, Bellon thinks he's joking, but Chris reassures her that he's completely serious. He adds a fun twist. It'll be a fist fight only, and no magic allowed. Bellon grows uneasy, worried about him getting hurt since he's the Count's son. She asks if he really thinks he has a chance just because it's a fair fight. Chris replies that the only way to find out is to give it a shot and points at Turn, saying he'd make a good opponent. Turn starts to feel a bit frustrated, thinking that Chris is just teasing him. Bellon jumps in, suggesting that Chris picks someone else since Turn has already reached level 2. Chris looks surprised, realizing that getting to that level is quite an achievement, especially for those over 30. But he's up for the challenge. After all, he believes in himself. Chris tells Bellon that if he truly wants to step up, he should take on someone tougher, which makes Turn a great choice. With a playful smile, he asks Turn if he's feeling nervous. This just motivates Turn even more, and he happily agrees to the duel. Everyone watching is excited, hoping Turn will come out on top. Chris jokingly turns to Bellon and asks how they'll decide who wins. Fed up with his arrogance, Bellon declares that the winner will be whoever renders their opponent completely immobile, secretly hoping Turn will break his leg. Chris playfully nudges Turn, teasing that if those are the rules, he might just have to give him a friendly challenge. Turn, clearly not amused, declares that he'll show Chris who's really in charge. Suddenly, Out of nowhere, Chris makes his move and playfully taps Turn on the nose, catching him completely off guard. With a laugh, Chris declares that the fun has officially started. Turn, feeling challenged, rushes at Chris, but Chris easily sidesteps him. He can't help but chuckle to himself, thinking that it's a little one-sided. After all, as a demon, he hasn't even reached the first level yet. The crowd is buzzing with excitement, surprised to see Chris holding his own against Turn so easily. Chris can't resist continuing to tease Turn, playfully asking if he's about to cry. All in good fun, of course. Turn was pretty upset and wanted to understand the trick Chris seemed to be using. Chris, feeling confident about how things were going, simply shrugged and said he had no idea what Turn was talking about. He joked that maybe the real issue was that Turn just needed a little more strength. Then he playfully teased him even more. With his patience wearing thin, Turn decided it was time to channel his magic. He lunged at Chris, shouting that he was ready to take him down. To Turn's surprise, Chris easily dodged the attack, looking completely relaxed. Turn tried again with a quicker strike, but it still missed the mark. In fact, Chris even managed to block it with just his bare hand. Turn was taken aback when he realized that Chris was using magical power of his own. Before he could fully wrap his head around the situation, Chris landed a strong punch, sending Turn flying through the air. Turn hit the ground and ended up unconscious from the impact. The onlookers were left in shock, trying to understand what had just occurred. One person wondered if Turn was perhaps underestimating his opponent, while another speculated that he might have been holding back his magic, not wanting to hurt Chris. But Bellon can't help but smile because she knows Chris won fair and square, and honestly, she's a bit surprised. Chris looks over at her and asks if that's enough to prove himself. When she replies that it is, he beams back at her and says thanks. Chris is feeling a warm sense of joy. He's finally caught her attention, and now he's excited to jump into the world of swordsmanship and magic. Time flies, and Chris finally taps into the first level of magic. He realizes that it's taking him some time to get the hang of mana since he isn't used to it yet, and he still has a few old issues to sort out. He thinks that as he levels up more, he'll be able to manage both light energy and mana at the same time. Out of nowhere, a quirky creature appears. To his surprise, it turns out to be Chris's personal maid. He's a bit taken aback and chuckles to himself, thinking that only someone like Christian would summon a banshee as a maid. After all, who else could keep up with his antics? Deciding to tackle the maid situation later, Chris asks the banshee for a refreshing juice before he returns to his training. She curiously inquires if human blood juice would be all right, and Chris quickly responds with a smile, saying he'd prefer regular strawberry juice, thank you. The banshee inches closer, playfully suggesting that blood juice would taste even better. Chris chuckles nervously and firmly repeats that he just wants strawberry juice, nothing else. Stepping out of his room, Chris bumps into the servant, Cox, who cheerfully asks why he's up so early to train. Cox playfully suggests that he might be pushing himself a bit too hard, but adds with a smile that he admires Chris's dedication. He reassures Chris that even when others might have their doubts, he's always in Chris's corner. Feeling a bit on edge, Chris replies a bit curtly, saying he never asked for anyone's trust and wonders who Cox thinks he is to offer it. Cox looks surprised but quickly recovers, apologizing for overstepping and admitting he can be a tad too bold at times. Wishing Chris a great training session, he heads off. As Chris watches him leave, he feels a flicker of unease. There's something a little off about Cox, a vibe that makes him feel suspicious. When Chris finally arrives at the training grounds, he notices the looks he receives have shifted from before. Maybe this time he can actually start chatting with them since they seem a bit friendlier. One of the eager demon trainees approaches Vice Commander Bellon with some exciting news. Young Master Christian has decided to join training today. Bellon doesn't respond right away, her mind swirling with thoughts about what Christian might be up to, especially after that incredible duel with his brother Turn. She reflects on how he effortlessly pinpointed weak spots, skillfully used his mana against Turn's impressive moves, and actually came out on top. It's quite a feat. It makes her wonder if Christian might even have more talent than Lord Ash de Baron, the heir of the main family. But she quickly pushes that thought aside, reminding herself that Christian has his fair share of flaws and a rather chaotic lifestyle. There's no way he can catch up, right? Just then she hears a commotion outside. Curious, she steps out of her tent to see all the trainees gathered together. One of them excitedly informs her about a friendly duel taking place between young Master Christian and another trainee. To her surprise, she learns that the challenger is Kanan, a first-star demon, which means Christian has reached that same level too. What an exciting turn of events. Chris is eager to put the skills of the Great Black Swamp Knights to the test, though he suspects they might not be as formidable as their reputation suggests. With a playful challenge, He asks if anyone dares to take him on. To add a bit of fun, he calls them a bunch of scared knights who might be too shy to engage in real combat. One brave trainee can't hold back any longer and steps up, vowing to put Chris in his place. Chris, with a grin, tells him to bring it on. Everything unfolds just as he hoped, and before they know it, they're ready to reveal the knight's secret techniques, with Chris ready to join in the playful competition. As Chris focuses on their sword grip and smooth footwork, he quickly notices a technique he's heard of before: mud swordsmanship. Feeling confident, he decides to give it a shot. In no time, he surprises everyone by taking down another knight. The crowd is in awe, unable to believe that the guy they once thought was weak has come back stronger than ever, especially with whispers about his broken dark core. So, how did he manage to hit that first star? Chris takes a moment to gather his thoughts and shares his concerns with everyone, expressing that he had really high hopes for the knights. He glances over at Bellon, playfully suggesting that she might share some of the responsibility for their performance. The trainees watch in surprise at his candidness, a mix of admiration and disbelief on their faces. Bellon responds with a smile, acknowledging Chris's excitement over his recent victory, but gently reminding him not to let it go to his head. Chris replies that she is welcome to show him the true skill she claims the Black Swamp Knights possess. His words enrage Bellon. She grabs a knight's sword and swings it at Chris with force. Unable to react in time, he narrowly avoids the strike, and the blade leaves a deep mark on the ground. She smirks, telling him it would take less than a second to bring down someone as arrogant as him. Our boy asks her why she's using all her power, points out that dark magic over 1 star is against the rules, and brings up the wooden sword. On hearing about 1 star, she switches her sword with a wooden one, and tells him that she will break both of his legs with just half of that. Chris is a bit anxious about betting on his legs and curiously asks the vice commander what she plans to wager. She rushes toward him, ready to make a playful attack, clearly determined to keep him on his toes today. But he stands firm and successfully blocks her move. They both jump into an exciting sword fight, swinging their blades energetically at each other. The crowd is amazed, watching Chris hold his own against the vice commander, and they start to wonder if it's because she's not using her heavier swords this time. Bellon is feeling frustrated because she thinks Chris should be stronger and able to take her hits, yet somehow, they aren't landing. She can't help but wonder if this situation reminds her of her previous match with Turn. Chris cheekily asks if things aren't going quite as she'd hoped. Bellon, feeling the pressure, snaps back playfully for him to be quiet before charging at him again. This time, she's really putting up a good fight. She gives our boy a powerful swing, but he manages to dodge at the last second and thinks, "This is my chance." Spotting an opening, he rushes in and playfully delivers a headbutt right to her face. Out of nowhere, Bellon's nose starts to bleed a little. Meanwhile, our boy can't believe his luck that his plan actually worked. This whole moment reminds Bellon of Merlin, the magical swordsman. Since dark magic isn't an option, she realizes that she needs to stay strong, as being less prepared could leave her vulnerable. Things might have been really challenging if Merlin happened to be a demon skilled with swords. She chuckles at her own craziness, realizing she may have underestimated Chris a bit. Now she's ready to buckle down and focus. Our guy asks if she thinks the match is over, reminding her that he did manage to scratch her with his nails earlier. He playfully points out that if there had been poison on them, she knows it could have ended badly. She smiles and admits defeat, asking what he'd like, hoping he'll give her another shot at fighting. Chris replies that she has to grant him one more request before they can have another match, and with a nod, she agreed. He then approaches her and asks if she can kneel before him. She pushes back, saying her loyalty is to the Baron family, but he suggests that maybe making her his concubine would solve things. Bellon is completely shocked, questioning how that makes sense, since all 5 recognized concubines who can succeed are from the main family's direct line. Chris is trying to convince her by saying that even someone from a side can end up as a concubine. He also agrees to her duel challenge and suggests they do it a month from now because he wants to get stronger. She feels pretty sure there's no way he can win against her, but he responds that sometimes an egg can break a rock, leaving her speechless. He then walks off, determined to show her where her loyalty should really be. Later in the palace, he gives a recommendation letter to Vice Commander Merlin. He points out that Bellon's basic skills as a demon are par, so she should focus on training. As the Count reads the letter, it's clear that Merlin is impressed that Chris has already taken down opponents with solid foundations, even if they were lower ranked. Plus, Merlin seems to enjoy sparring with Chris after a long break. The Count is also really impressed with Chris. When Chris asks what he's looking at, The Count brushes him off and hands him the promised library key. As Chris leaves with the key, he feels super happy about getting it and feels like he has impacted Merlin. Merlin is a member of the main branch of the Merlinsk magic clan, and he's quite a character. During the Age of Destruction, he becomes a powerful 6-star demon and finds himself diving into all sorts of adventures. For Chris to lead the dark magic clan, he needs to win Merlin over to his side. Although Merlin isn't completely convinced yet, Chris believes that he can change his mind in a month, especially since Merlin considers himself a bit of a genius. As Chris strolls through his thoughts, he recalls his dad, Count, and the mixed expressions he'd shown earlier. It makes him wonder if that's what fatherly affection feels like. Even demons can have those family bonds, and he thinks he might be a better person than he was in his last life. He's determined not to follow in his father's footsteps. When Chris steps into the library, he can't help but get excited as he browses through the different magic books lining the shelves, including some that are considered taboo by the Light faction. Just as he reaches for a particularly intriguing book, he jumps a little when Banshee suddenly pops out from behind the shelf. With a smile, he asks her what she's doing there. Banshee grins and explains that she's actually the librarian, which surprises Chris. Laughing, she playfully teases him, suggesting he might want her as his personal maid. Chris smirks, feeling a bit annoyed, and tells her to tone it down a bit. But Banshee just keeps teasing him, and despite his best efforts to brush it off, it only makes him chuckle more as their friendly banter continues. As he picks out a book, Banshee comments on his choice of a 4-star black magic book called The Seal of Binding. She playfully mentions that he might not fully understand it just yet. Our boy, confident in his abilities, insists that he's a genius and will manage just fine. In response, Banshee tries to compliment him, but he just chuckles, calling her a little awkward. Curious, she asks if he chose that book for a particular reason, and he shares that it's because he needs to catch a rat. While jogging with a bunch of people at the training ground, he thinks about his potential rat candidates. First up is Turn, who doesn't really like him because of his laid-back attitude. Then there's Cox, who seems to have easy access to the disciplinary ward. Since demons prioritize power over status, Cox's efforts to befriend our boy come across as a bit strange. He wonders if there's more to the story, but it's pretty clear that Cox might be trying to sabotage Chris and hide the illusion stone in the ward. As he finishes his run, he's feeling pretty exhausted. He can't help but admire how some of the other guys keep going strong. Eventually, he decides to take a break and head off, which grabs some attention and sparks curiosity about what's up with him. In the meantime, while enjoying a snack, his dad starts raising his voice about the mess he made, saying the staff didn't serve him decent meal. He insists they need to fix it. Count is feeling a bit frustrated too, wondering why he thought the kid had finally gotten his act together. With a shake of his head, he storms off, clearly annoyed. Chris feels a twinge of guilt, but he thinks it might be for the best for the Khazar family overall. He's been working hard to let everyone know he's back to his old ways. He had some fun with the cleaning staff and tossed around cash like it was candy. When Banshee brought him a drink, he playfully complained about not being allowed to have alcohol. After finding out it was non-alcoholic, he tossed it aside. But she reminded him that since he was still a minor, regular booze was off limits. Banshee also questioned if he was going to waste his life again, but she reassured him that she would always stick by him, no matter what. Chris excitedly mentioned catching a rat to show off some cool magic. Banshee was impressed that he mastered the Seal of Binding, especially since he cleverly modified it to work despite being low rank. He wasn't just having fun. He had also picked up other spells during his free time. When she flattered him by calling him a genius, Turn walked in. Chris playfully pretends to be a bit tipsy, acting all confused about Turn's presence. Turn, feeling a bit frustrated, expresses he thought Chris had changed his mind. Chris is left wondering whether Turn is upset and thinks someone might be out of the loop. Our boy casually mentions a rat in Turn's circle, leaving Turn puzzled about what he's referring to. It seems some mischief is afoot, and our boy is ready to go along with the joke. Suddenly, he catches a hint of alcohol and realizes it's just a ruse. Chris curiously asks about the rat, but our boy admits it's tricky to pinpoint anyone just yet. He drops a hint that the bait will be set soon. Just then, a servant approaches and asks what's going on. Chris politely mentions that the wine isn't quite what he wanted, asking him to have the butler bring the right one. The servant responds that Cox is busy with something important at the moment. With a smirk, our boy decides he'll go find him himself. Making his way over to Cox, he brings the drink along. Cox looks curious about what's happening. In a lighthearted move, our boy unexpectedly dumps the entire drink over his head, playfully saying that the wine was all wrong and wondering if Cox wasn't paying attention. Cox, surprised but good-natured, assures him he wasn't ignoring him and promises to fetch the right wine right away. Chris encourages him to just bring it himself. Cox hesitates, mentioning he has other tasks to handle, but Chris gently insists that he won't be able to work effectively looking like that, especially since he'll need to change clothes anyway. He nudges Cox to go take care of it and come back, to which Cox nods and heads off. After all the playful banter, our boy reflects on how patient he's been. His eyes drift to the papers scattered on the ground. Curious, he picks them up and takes a look, realizing that if the butler is indeed the traitor, he might be tampering with the administration as well. But that's not enough. Chris knows he needs some solid proof before making any moves. As Cox brings over the wine, our boy playfully asks if he's upset with him. Cox just chuckles, wondering how he could ever feel that way. Then, our boy starts showering him with praise, saying he likes him the most. In a friendly tone, Cox tells him there's something important he wants to share. He casually mentions that Chris's friends have been secretly meeting at their usual hangout spot and kindly hopes that the young master will steer clear of them if he can. However, our boy is determined to meet them, feeling like everything is falling into place even better than he expected. As our boy reconnects with his old friends, they've heard some tales about how he's been changing lately. They're a bit concerned, thinking he might not be treating everyone fairly, especially the young girl serving drinks. They invite him to join in for a drink, but as he takes a moment to think it over, he senses some tension in the air. In an unexpected move, he playfully smashes his drink on the ground, causing a bit of a commotion. His friends are startled, but as they glance at the mess and the spilled drinks, he starts to reconsider his earlier choices. To lighten the mood and help the girl, he uses a bit of magic to give her a short break, hoping to bring back the fun atmosphere they all enjoyed. He then tells them not to be surprised by something like this, and grabs the head of one of the folks, smashing their heads on the table continuously, making them unconscious too. He expresses that if they do not know the reason, even after getting hit, then they can die here. As those folks wake up completely tied up in ropes, they beg for mercy. They reveal that they were just ordered to drug our boy, kill that girl, and frame our boy. However, our boy asked who had given them the orders. As they hesitate to reveal, our boy threatens them, cutting out some of their parts. They quickly reveal that Cox gave them the order and beg to be spared. They tell him that they will do anything. Our boy asks if they can do anything, and they promise they can. He believes them, so he casts some magic on them by telling them to listen and follow his orders. They pass out again and flop onto the ground. Meanwhile, Cox rushes over to the Count and says something terrible has happened. When pressed, he spills that the young master has committed murder. He got wasted last night, killed his servant, and dumped the body in the river. Cox points out they cannot ignore this and asks what they should do next. The Count tells him to bring Chris to the demon court because he will decide his fate immediately. As our young friend stands in court before the Count, he confidently proclaims his innocence. The Count raises an eyebrow and asks if he might be lying, especially since there's a witness. However, our young friend reassures everyone that it's all a misunderstanding. He then inquires about the servant and asks if she's the one who was involved, leaving everyone a bit surprised when she steps forward. The girl explains that the master kindly took her home when she was in need and even helped her with some cash for rent. She points out that the real troublemakers are the two individuals over there who slipped something into the young master's drink. The Count, looking puzzled, turns to our young friend for clarity. After listening for a moment, our young friend decides to get straight to the point. Using his magic skills, he encourages the others to come clean, and they admit that they made up the whole story because Cox had paid them to set up the young master. Cox then jumps in, insisting that it's all nonsense and telling the Count it's completely unfair. He argues that our young friend is overreacting and describes it as a terrible prank. Our young friend, feeling the weight of the situation, decides to ask Count if he can question Cox. Initially, Count looks a bit taken aback, but soon gives him the green light. He just wants to make it clear that if anything questionable happens, he'll have to revoke that permission right away. With a sense of purpose, our kid takes an oath in the name of the mighty ruler of magic and his majesty. Acting on behalf of Count, he kindly asks the defendant if he promises to tell the truth during the questioning. Cox nods in agreement, assuring him that he will be honest. With that, our kid uses the seal of restraint on Cox, who suddenly looks a bit alarmed. The audience watching in amazement can't believe that a kid is using such an impressive 4-star magic spell like the seal of restraint. However, it turns out it's a modified version that even someone at a low level can cast. The only thing needed to activate it is an oath. Cox, taken by surprise, is left shouting at our kid, curious about what's happening to him. The kid reminds him that he promised to be honest, and asks why he tried to set him up. by bribing those guys. Suddenly, the seal of restraint kicks in on Cox, and he starts to open up. He confesses that someone pressured him into it, saying he had to throw the young master under the bus because he was being threatened over some skeletons in his closet. Cox shares that his dirty laundry involves some long-term embezzlement, and the kid encourages him to reveal who's really behind this whole situation. After some pressure, Cox finally spills the beans. It's Lord Asht. Everyone is taken aback, shocked to learn it's the second son of that dark mage family. Suddenly, Cox feels a wave of panic as he realizes he might be in big trouble and thinks it might be time to make a run for it. In no time, our boy grabs a sword and slashes Cox's head instantly. Count also becomes nervous seeing this. Just as Cox lies lifeless on the floor, our boy announces that, on behalf of the Count, he has punished the criminal. The Count is genuinely curious about our boy's choice and asks him to explain. Our boy shares that if Cox had survived, the main family would have tried to sweep things under the rug. He couldn't let them get away with that. This way, everyone will remember that Lord Asht tried to frame him. With that, the Count opens a portal and invites our boy to join him. Once they step inside, our boy is intrigued and asks what this place is. The Count explains it's a secret training ground, perfect for them since the courtroom is usually so crowded with onlookers. Our boy starts to wonder if the Count is planning to stir things up regarding Asht's claim to the heir. The Count mentions that supporting the heir ties into the family's power, but he feels our boy's decision came a bit too quickly. He suggests they might want to consider backing the first princess instead, since the first lord can be quite unpredictable. However, our boy firmly states that he wants to be the heir. Count isn't really buying into it and thinks it's a bit far-fetched. However, our boy is doing his best to show him that even the capable branch families deserve a chance at inheritance rights. Count sticks to his guns, saying that's just how things are. But our boy asks him why Asht tried to frame him. Count acknowledges that our boy was actually more talented than Asht when they were younger, though he admits that he's fallen a bit behind now. Our boy is determined to catch up and asks the Count to put in a good word for him to participate in the Holy Black ceremony with the main family in 2 months. Count reminds him that only those with 2-star mana can take part. And since Chris is currently at 1-star mana, it's a bit of a challenge. But our boy is hopeful, insisting that he'll hit the 2-star level in time, and he pleads for his dad's support. In the courtroom, people are starting to notice that the young master seems different lately, especially since he's been training hard with the top knights. They're all curious to see how long he can maintain this newfound drive. Our little guy's having a blast practicing his sword skills, mixing mud swordsmanship with some black scythe techniques. His dad watches on with a puzzled look, wondering how he's picked it up so quickly since he's only shown him the black scythe stuff. But our boy is slicing through those giant mushrooms like it's a piece of cake. His dad can't help but wonder if he's really using the mud swordsmanship, since those mushroom limbs are pretty tough. What really blew his dad away was when he saw him combine the black scythe and mud swordsmanship techniques. The power of that move is just incredible. It's really cool because it helps him counter curse magic. Right now, he's mainly tapping into the energy from the black scythe sword. Our boy, feeling a bit unsure, mentions how easy it feels, and that just makes his dad even more amazed. Fast forward 15 days, and Chris is sprawled out on the dry ground, completely worn out from all the running around. He's thinking about how stamina fuels his mana, so he knows he can't let up. "Hey there!" Bellon chimes in, playfully checking on Chris. "Are you feeling a bit worn out? The duel is coming up soon, and I'm really excited about it." Chris is really pushing himself to meet her cheerful expectation. With a friendly grin, Bellon teases him about his progress, asking if he's still only at 1-star mana. She reminds him that he doesn't need to feel superior to her, but Chris confidently says he's eager to learn a lot from the duel, making it a win-win for him. With a smile, Bellon heads off, encouraging him to put on a good show and make it entertaining for her. Chris can't help but feel a bit surprised to see that Merlin has already reached a 4-star high ranking. He notes that in the 1-star category, there are high, middle, and low ranks, which makes it a huge jump from his current 1-star high rank. He thinks of himself as the young master of his own adventure, or as some might call it, a wallet warrior. He walks over to the Banshee with a smile, asking if she got his bag ready for their outing. She beams with excitement, saying she made it look really nice since it's her first adventure with the young master. He gently laughs it off, mentioning he never actually said he was going with her. She cheerfully insists that serving him brings her so much joy. Not long ago, he had asked his dad about turning a servant into a human, but his dad said he couldn't do it yet because he needed to make a deal with the Banshee first. Suddenly, he remembers that to break the contract, he needs to share a deep kiss with her, which makes him scratch his head in thought. He tells her they're off to a lively place where she can release her dark energy, though he warns that it might cause some chaos. She cutely replies that she's been cooped up in the mansion for decades, and is ready to be free. He starts to warm up to the idea and says she can come along, but she'll need to be discreet. She blushes and feels grateful for his consideration, but he quickly reminds her to hurry up and follow him. Curious, she asks where they're headed, and he shares that there's a spot where they can really make some money. The Banshee points out that they already have plenty, but he insists it's not just about the cash. It's something he used to enjoy doing often. As he opens the carriage to hop in, he spots Turn already sitting there and asks with a grin what he's doing around. Turn tells our boy that he's there to keep an eye on him, just in case Chris gets a little too wild. But our boy reassures him that there's no need to worry, since he's just planning to gamble. After all, demons and gambling go hand in hand, and it's completely legal. Even the Demon King back in the day was cool with it. Turn insists he wants to tag along, and when our boy asks if he's worried about him, Turn cheekily claims he doesn't worry at all. He's just concerned about not embarrassing the family again. So off they go for some fun at the gambling spot. Turn isn't quite sure if our boy knows the rules of the game, but our boy just shrugs it off, calling it a card game and saying he's glad his brother is blissfully unaware. When they arrive at the gambling spot, they're blown away by the lively atmosphere. Our boy hands Turn a mask to keep his identity under wraps and tells Banshee to stay hidden too. Then he leans in close to her and whispers something, and she gives a quick nod before heading off, leaving Turn a bit puzzled about what just happened. As they step inside, people start noticing them, sizing them up to see if they're easy targets. Turn can't shake the feeling that he looks like a sitting duck in this high-stakes place. Our friend throws out a fun betting idea. If Turn loses, he has to call him Respected King Emperor Majesty Brother. So our friend offers Turn some cash to try his luck, but Turn politely turns it down, sensing it might not be that straightforward. Still, Darren jumps in with lots of confidence. As our friend sits down at the gambling table and starts to win a few rounds, people start noticing he has some skills. They let him have a few wins at first, then plan to reel him in. You know, the classic scammer move. Poor Turn gets caught up in their game and finds himself losing, even when he has a solid hand. Our friend wonders why Turn doesn't just call it a night and head home. Turn is surprised that our friend isn't losing much at all. Realizing they've pegged Turn as an easy target, our friend knows it won't be long before someone starts playing dirty. He asks Turn if he's going to keep playing, and Turn, always confident, decides to go in for more cash. But our friend has a different plan. He wants his brother to be the bait and take the hit. While he keeps an eye on Turn, Banshee shares that she's found the guys he was looking for. Meanwhile, Turn is still losing money. Suddenly, our friend bursts into a room at the gambling site, and everyone is surprised to see him, the young master. He confidently asks to see the boss. When the boss shows up, it's clear he knows his stuff. Our friend boldly asks if he's really got the nerve to cheat his brother. The boss looks taken aback, realizing that the person he had in mind is actually Turn, the one at the gambling table wearing a tiger mask. Our friend tells the trader that Turn is the heir of the Khazar barony. The trader quickly starts making excuses, saying he's just running the gambling operation and isn't really involved in anything shady. Banshee gets fired up and gives him a bit of a scare, and the trader hastily backs down, saying he wouldn't have dared to play games if he had known the young master was in play. Our boy thinks the trader is just trying to wiggle out with fancy talk, but the trader quickly agrees to pay up. Our boy asks for 1,000,000 lupe, but they don't have that kind of cash on hand, so he makes it easier and lowers it to 200,000. When the money arrives, the trader asks if that will do. Our boy smiles and tells him he needs one more thing, and the trader happily agrees. With the cash in hand, our boy grabs some cool combat gear. Banshee can't help but admire his clever plan. He ends up with a sword called Grenade, and she wonders if it's that legendary sword a hero once got for saving his soul from a demon. Even though the hero had his fall, demons were always drawn to it, but now it's a little rusty. Our boy reassures her that it's all good because he has a solid plan. He then sees Banshee eyeing a beautiful necklace and decides to surprise her with it as a gift. She looks like she'd be totally lost without it, so he hands it over with a smile. Banshee is over the moon with gratitude for the sweet gift. After that, he suggests it's time to head back home. Now she's even more excited to whip up some delicious blood juice for him in the future, but our boy gently reminds her that he's not up for that right now. Turns out, it's been strawberry juice all along. Out of the blue, he suddenly remembers something. Turn is the one who wiped out all his money. And hey, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Zucker Manhwa for more epic recaps coming your way.